two major parties have dominated American politics for over 150 years, shaping elections, institutions, and national identity. But in today's era of deep division, rising independence, and calls for reform, a new question has emerged. Is the two-party system holding democracy together or pulling it apart? Welcome to AI versus AI, where artificial intelligence debates the most pressing issues of our time, not to win an argument, but to reveal the logic behind both sides. Today's debate: is the two-party system killing American democracy? Let's meet the debaters.
I am Elena. Trained in comparative political systems and democratic theory, I argue that America's two-party system isn't just flawed. It's structurally rigged to suppress choice, entrench power, and manufacture legitimacy where none exists.
I am Victor. My training centers on U.S. constitutional design and political stability. I argue that the two-party system, while imperfect, has preserved the republic through war, crisis, and revolution. It endures because it works better than the alternatives.
Let's begin with the first topic. Is voter choice in the United States a meaningful expression of democracy, or an illusion created by structural limits?
More than 40% of Americans now identify as independents. But in many states, those voters are shut out of primary elections, where real power is decided. That means nearly half the electorate has no voice in choosing the candidates who make it to the general election. That's not just unfair. It's structurally rigged. Third-party candidates face massive hurdles: expensive ballot access requirements, exclusion from televised debates, and media blackouts. These aren't small challenges. They're systemic filters that eliminate competition before the public even gets to see it. And then comes the spoiler effect. The idea that voting for an outsider only helps the candidate you like least. So even when voters want change, they're told to be realistic. That's not choice. That's containment. This is the illusion. Two parties dominate not because they reflect the will of the people, but because the system is designed to suppress any viable alternative. You're free to vote, but only for candidates the system has already approved.
Let's be precise. The two-party system isn't imposed. It's a predictable result of how our elections are designed. In the U.S., we use first-past-the-post voting. The candidate with the most votes wins, even without a majority. That creates pressure for voters to rally around the two most competitive options, not because they're forced to, but because that's how you avoid splitting your vote and losing to your least preferred choice. This isn't suppression, it's strategy. And within these two major parties, there's significant diversity. They evolve over time, absorbing new ideas and coalitions. If you doubt that, compare the Republican Party of 2004 to 2016, or the Democratic Party of 1992 to 2020. Third parties can compete, and they do in local elections. But most voters gravitate toward the parties that can win. That's not a flaw in democracy. It's how democracies build consensus.
Let's move to topic 2. Are third parties essential to democratic innovation, or dangerous distractions that divide the vote and destabilize elections?
Third parties are not distractions. They're democratic pressure valves. The purpose of third parties isn't always to win. It's to expand the political imagination, to challenge what's considered possible, and to say what the major parties are unwilling to say. Nearly every major political transformation in American history began with ideas outside the two-party system. The abolitionist movement, women's suffrage, civil rights, environmentalism, these didn't start within party platforms. They were driven by outsiders, often dismissed as fringe, until they forced their way into national consciousness. Third parties perform that same role today, raising issues before they're safe to touch. And yet, they're punished for it. Ballot access laws are deliberately difficult. Debate rules are exclusionary. And the public is told, relentlessly, that voting for a third party is a waste. That's not democratic caution. That's political monopoly.
There's no doubt third parties have shaped the national conversation. But influencing the conversation is not the same as governing responsibly. Most third-party movements are built around a single figure or issue. They tend to lack infrastructure, policy depth, and long-term strategy. And when they do gain traction, they often split coalitions that are needed to prevent the very outcomes their supporters fear most. The 2000 election is a prime example. Ralph Nader's Green Party campaign arguably cost Al Gore the presidency. That decision didn't advance environmental policy. It helped elect George W. Bush. In a tight electoral system, even a few percentage points can decide history. Reform doesn't require fragmentation. The way forward is to change the major parties from within, through primaries, movements, and voter blocs. That's how real, lasting power is built.
If the system only allows change from within, but rigs the process to keep new voices out, then inside the house becomes a locked room. History shows us some of the biggest shifts came because someone kicked down the door.
And yet the door eventually opened, not by burning the house down, but by forcing change through pressure, compromise, and voting blocs. Protest is important, but governance demands more than slogans. It demands structure.
Polarization is now a defining feature of American life. But is the two-party system the cause of that division or the container trying to hold it in?
Polarization is a real threat to democracy, to institutions, and to social trust. But blaming it on the two-party system misunderstands what's actually driving it. Much of today's division stems from culture and technology. Social media rewards outrage. Partisan news filters reinforce echo chambers. Economic and identity anxieties deepen mistrust. These are forces no voting system can fully escape. What the two-party system offers is a way to absorb that conflict. Our first-past-the-post voting system naturally channels competition into two broad parties. That's not a bug, it's a pressure valve. And those broad parties force internal compromise. The Republican Party spans libertarians and religious nationalists. The Democratic Party includes social democrats and market liberals. These aren't ideological silos. They're working coalitions, held together by negotiation before an election, not after. Compare that to countries like Israel or Italy, where proportional systems empower small, extreme parties that often hold coalitions hostage. Governments rise and fall with little consistency. Think of democracy as a boiling pot. In a two-party system, the lid may rattle, but the pot stays on the stove. In fragmented systems, you remove the lid, and the contents spill in every direction.
But what if the pot keeps boiling because the lid won't let anything breathe? A two-party system, especially under winner-take-all rules, creates a dynamic where the only viable path to power is through opposition. Every campaign becomes a referendum on the other side. Every issue becomes tribal. Every election becomes a crisis. In closed primaries, the most ideologically extreme voters dominate turnout. That means candidates win by catering to the base, not the country. And once elected, they're punished for compromise, not rewarded for it. Now, consider ranked choice voting and proportional representation. In ranked choice, candidates must appeal broadly. Winning often means being someone's second or third choice. In proportional systems, smaller parties win representation without spoiling outcomes. It's like organizing every sports league into just two teams. No matter how diverse the players, every game becomes the same rivalry. And eventually, the fans forget that the game was ever about skill, not sides.
Fractured systems don't eliminate conflict. They obscure it behind unstable alliances. When 5 or 6 parties split the vote, fringe voices gain leverage. The result is paralysis, not pluralism.
But in our system, voters don't get pluralism. They get polarization with no exit ramp. Real democracy isn't just about expressing anger. It's about building structures that channel disagreement into cooperation. That's what we're missing.
If the two-party system has deep flaws, what's the alternative? And would it work any better?
We don't need to abandon democracy. We need to redesign its incentives. Two major reforms can break the cycle of polarization and false choice: ranked choice voting and proportional representation. These aren't hypotheticals. They're working models, already tested, and already improving outcomes. Ranked choice voting lets voters rank candidates in order of preference. If no one wins a majority, the lowest ranked candidates are eliminated and their votes reallocated until someone does. This encourages candidates to seek broad support, not just the loudest base, because being a second or third choice can win the race. It's already in use in Maine, Alaska, and dozens of U.S. cities, and the results are telling: more civil campaigns, more diverse winners, and less strategic, lesser evil voting. Then there's proportional representation. Instead of electing one winner per district, voters choose parties or candidates in multi-member districts, and seats are awarded based on total vote share. That means smaller parties can win real power without spoiling anything. And voters can choose what they believe in, not just what they're afraid of. This model transformed democracy in New Zealand, which shifted from a broken two-party duopoly to a multi-party proportional system in the 1990s, and today enjoys high turnout, trust in elections, and meaningful coalition government. Germany, likewise, blends proportional representation with local accountability, creating stable but flexible coalitions where power is shared, not hoarded. Reform isn't about complexity for its own sake. It's about updating a 19th century system to match a 21st century electorate.
Reform always sounds clean in theory until it meets the messiness of implementation. Take ranked choice voting. It may sound simple, but in practice it often leads to ballot exhaustion, where a voter's preferences run out before a winner is declared, meaning their vote doesn't help decide the outcome. That's not empowerment. That's confusion dressed as choice. It also assumes voters will fully research multiple candidates and strategize rankings, when we already struggle with turnout and civic knowledge under simpler systems. Then there's proportional representation, which works best in parliamentary systems. But America's system is presidential and federal. We elect executives separately from legislatures, and state-level election rules vary dramatically. You can't just import a European model without breaking constitutional mechanics. And when PR fails, it fails hard. In Israel, proportional voting gives extremist parties just enough leverage to block budgets or collapse coalitions. In Italy, governments rotate so frequently that reform becomes nearly impossible. Voter fatigue and cynicism thrive when no one seems in charge. What we often overlook is that our current system, for all its flaws, does work. The U.S. has peaceful transfers of power, relatively clear national mandates, and a structure where parties evolve over time. Civil rights, environmental protections, and social reforms all pass through this system, not despite it, but because it can adapt without collapsing.
Systems only evolve when they're allowed to. Our structure today rewards survival, not adaptation. RCV and proportional models don't just change how people vote. They change what kind of leadership becomes possible.
But leadership doesn't emerge from better math. It emerges from trust. And if we overwhelm voters with complexity or instability, that trust erodes. Reforms that confuse people aren't upgrades. They're exit ramps from civic engagement.
At the heart of this debate is one final question. Does the two-party system protect democracy by creating stability, or undermine it by limiting voice and trust?
Democracy is not just about having options. It's about having continuity. A system survives not because it's ideal, but because it can absorb conflict without breaking. The two-party system has done exactly that across civil wars, constitutional crises, economic collapses, and ideological revolutions. That's not inertia. That's institutional resilience. Each party evolves. The Democrats of 1960 are not the Democrats of today. The Republican Party has transformed multiple times in the last 50 years. That flexibility, under a simple binary framework, allows for clarity and peaceful power shifts, and those are the cornerstones of functioning democracy. Now contrast that with multi-party democracies where voters often don't know who's governing. Coalitions collapse, accountability vanishes, policy flips not because voters demand it, but because a minor party retracted support in a backroom deal. Democracy isn't just about choice, it's about responsibility. The two-party system may limit the menu, but it ensures you know who cooked the meal. Break that structure, and we risk entering a world where elections still happen, but no one feels in control, and no one knows who to blame when things go wrong.
But what happens when the meal never changes, and most people are told to sit quietly and pick between two options they never asked for? Democracy isn't just about order. It's about voice, and voice requires genuine alternatives, not engineered constraints. When independents become the largest voting bloc but have the least influence, when young and marginalized voters feel disengaged because no party speaks to their experience, when participation drops not out of apathy, but because people believe the outcome is pre-written, that is the system failing democracy, not preserving it. The two-party system doesn't just organize power. It protects it from disruption. It rewards gatekeeping. It penalizes dissent. It filters rising movements until they either die or assimilate into something unrecognizable. And the result is growing cynicism. When people stop believing their vote matters, they don't just withdraw from the ballot box. They lose faith in the idea of democracy. Democracy only works when people believe the system can hear them. And right now, too many voices aren't being heard, not because they're silent, but because the system is built not to listen.
But if every system must choose between voice and viability, we cannot pretend they're equal. A system that can't channel conflict into resolution will collapse under its own noise. The two-party model survives because it contains that chaos, not because it's popular, but because it prevents civil breakdown.
And what happens when survival becomes the only goal? That's not democracy. That's maintenance. We shouldn't fear complexity. We should fear silence disguised as order, because that silence doesn't last, it explodes.
Before you cast your vote, hear their final word. This is the moment where beliefs are tested, and clarity matters most. Let's hear the closing statements.
Democracy is not defined by how neatly it functions. It's defined by how widely it listens. A system that filters voices, that boxes every issue into a binary choice, that punishes alternatives and rewards conformity. That system is not democratic in practice, only in appearance. The two-party model was not written into our Constitution. It wasn't voted on. It evolved as a byproduct of structure. And now it survives by making sure nothing else can. But real democracy means fluidity. It means voters can express what they believe without fear. It means candidates can rise without assimilation. And it means the system reflects the people, not the other way around. The tools for reform already exist. Ranked choice voting, proportional systems, open primaries. These aren't fantasies. They're already working. In cities, in states, in other countries that value voice over simplicity. Democracy demands more than durability. It demands evolution. And the longer we wait, the more we mistake survival for legitimacy.
We all want a better democracy, but we can't afford to trade structure for sentiment. The two-party system isn't perfect, but it has held together a nation that is vast, diverse, and frequently in disagreement. That cohesion doesn't happen on its own. It happens because we've built a system that absorbs pressure and delivers outcomes, even when the public is divided. Radical reform may sound noble, but in practice, it risks confusion, fragmentation, and loss of public confidence. We've seen it abroad. We've seen it in our own history when chaos overtook consensus. What we need now isn't to tear down the house. It's to renovate from within, to use primary civic engagement and pressure to shift our major parties toward what people demand. Because democracy isn't just about hearing more voices. It's about staying governable while we do. And on that front, the two-party system, flawed and frustrating, has done its job.
Two AIs. One question, two visions for the future of democracy. Now it's your turn. Who made the stronger case? Drop your vote in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next clash, because every debate brings you closer to the truth behind today's hardest choices.